What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com. Here are my DFS picks for NBA Sunday, April 4th. These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our new videos. In this video, I'm going to go over my top picks for today's NBA slate. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, we have a 4-game slate tonight, so let's take a look at the point guard position. I like Stephen Curry from the Golden State Warriors playing the Atlanta Hawks, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they give up the 9th most fantasy points to opposing point guards. Stephen Curry has averaged 46.1 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 34 minutes per game with a 33% usage rate. He scored 51 and 49 fantasy points in the last 2 games, playing 36 and 30 minutes. He's projected at 46 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.1 times value. He's 9,000 FanDuel salary and 800 more on DraftKings. So I like that FanDuel price, but I still like him on DraftKings. I think he can score 50 fantasy points or more in this matchup and get you 5 times value or more on both sites. He scored 41 and 40 fantasy points in his last 2 games versus the Hawks, but he's been on fire the past couple of games, so I like Stephen Curry here versus the Atlanta Hawks. Okay, another point guard that I like, if you want to pay down a little bit, I like Jamal Murray from the Denver Nuggets playing the Orlando Magic, who have the 6th worst defense overall, and they give up the absolute most fantasy points to opposing point guards. Jamal Murray has averaged 35.8 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 36 minutes per game with a 25% usage rate. He scored 35, 52, and 27 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 38, 37, and 30 minutes. He's projected at 36.1 fantasy points here tonight, but I think he can score you 40 fantasy points or more and get you 5 times value or more. He's 7,800 FanDuel salary, and he's 400 more on DraftKings. He scored 36, 40, 31, 50, and 36 fantasy points in his last 5 games versus the Orlando Magic. It's a great matchup. So I like Jamal Murray here versus the Orlando Magic. Before I continue with the picks, I'm excited today because we added a new contest for everyone watching. If you want to enter the drawing for $100 PayPal, all you need to do is like this video, hit that subscribe button, and make a quick comment below to be entered into the drawing. We'll reply to a random comment and let you know that you won, and then we'll send you $100 PayPal. So it's that easy, and we pick a new winner every Saturday and announce them in our video. So get your comment in now so I can add another entry for you. Okay, let's take a look at the shooting guard position. Some mid-range plays for you. I like Will Barton from the Denver Nuggets playing the Orlando Magic, who have the 6th worst defense overall, and they give up the absolute most fantasy points to opposing shooting guards. Will Barton has averaged 24.4 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 31 minutes per game with a 19% usage rate. He scored 31, 20, and 25 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 34, 32, and 32 minutes. Now he's projected at 24.8 fantasy points here tonight, but I think he can score you 30 fantasy points or more and get you 5 times value or more. He's 5,500 FanDuel salary, and he's 200 more on DraftKings. He scored 36 and 28 fantasy points in his last 2 games versus the Magic. It's a great matchup. I think you can even stack both Will Barton and Jamal Murray, then run it back with one of the Orlando Magic players, because this should be a high-scoring game. So I like Will Barton here versus the Orlando Magic. Okay, another shooting guard that I like is Lou Williams from the Atlanta Hawks playing the Golden State Warriors, who have the 7th worst defense overall, and they're middle of the pack defending opposing shooting guards. Lou Williams has averaged 21.6 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 22 minutes per game with a 26% usage rate. He scored 41 and 16 fantasy points in his last 2 games, playing 30 and 22 minutes. So he's getting more minutes the past game, almost a third more minutes last game. Production through the roof, doubled his season average, and he's projected at 23.8 fantasy points here tonight, and that's still 5 times value. He's $4,800 FanDuel salary and $700 more on DraftKings. So I love that FanDuel price. Lou Williams has scored 28, 7, and 11 fantasy points in his last 3 games versus the Golden State Warriors. But remember, he's playing more minutes now, so his production should be over his season average, which should get you 5 times value or more. So I like Lou Williams here versus the Golden State Warriors. Okay, let's take a look at the small forward position. I like Kevin Porter Jr. from the Houston Rockets playing the New Orleans Pelicans, who have the 8th worst defense overall, and they give up the 4th most fantasy points to opposing small forwards. Kevin Porter Jr. has averaged 29.9 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 30 minutes per game with a 26% usage rate. He scored 35, 30, and 19 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 29, 31, and 36 minutes. He's projected at 30.8 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.1 times value. He's $6,000 FanDuel salary and $900 more on DraftKings. Now, he scored 35 and 26 fantasy points in his last 2 games versus the Pelicans, and he scored over 30 fantasy points 3 out of the last 4 games. It's a fast-paced game and a good matchup. I really like his FanDuel price. I think that FanDuel salary is way too low at only $6K. So I like Kevin Porter Jr. here versus the New Orleans Pelicans. Okay, another small forward that I like. Wow, is this guy playing well? I like Brogdon Bogdanovic from the Atlanta Hawks playing the Golden State Warriors, who have the 7th worst defense overall, and they're middle of the pack defending opposing small forwards. Bogdan Bogdanovic has averaged 22.4 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 25 minutes per game with a 20% usage rate. But take a look at his last 3 games. He scored 49, 51, and 47 fantasy points in his last 3 games, playing 32, 45, and 37 minutes. So who kidnapped the real Bogdan Bogdanovic, and when are you going to bring him back? That's the question. Are we going to see his fantasy points per game return to his season average, or is he going to keep on pace with these fantastic numbers? He is projected only at 25.5 fantasy points here tonight. That is over his season average, so it's a pretty good projection. But his salary has been boosted up here quite a bit based on his recent performance. And he's $7,200 FanDuel salary and $600 less on DraftKings. So this is probably a DraftKings play only for me because he's a reasonable salary on DraftKings. Only needs about 32 fantasy points to hit 5 times value or more. And then he could go off, get 40, 50 fantasy points like he's been doing recently. So I like Bogdan Bogdanovic, probably only on DraftKings here versus the Golden State Warriors. Okay, who do we have at the power forward position? I like Christian Wood from the Houston Rockets playing the New Orleans Pelicans, who have the 8th worst defense overall, and they give up the 9th most fantasy points to opposing power forwards. Christian Wood has averaged 40 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 31 minutes per game with a 26% usage rate. He scored 40 and 40 fantasy points in the last 2 games, playing 32 and 35 minutes. He's projected at 42.3 fantasy points here tonight, and that's 5.3 times value. He's 8,000 FanDuel salary, and he's 600 more on DraftKings. So I think that price is fine on both sites. He scored 43, 44, and 15 fantasy points in his last 3 games. It's a good matchup, a fast-paced game, so I like Christian Wood here versus the New Orleans Pelicans. Okay, now here's a mid-range play on FanDuel and a nice value play on DraftKings. I like Brandon Clark from the Memphis Grizzlies playing the Philadelphia 76ers, who have a good defense overall, and they've been good versus opposing power forwards. Brandon Clark has averaged 26.1 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 26 minutes per game with an 18% usage rate. He scored 24 and 26 fantasy points in the last 2 games, playing 24 and 26 minutes. He's projected at 25 fantasy points here tonight. Now on FanDuel, that's only 4.6 times value because he's 5,400 FanDuel salary, but he's 500 less on DraftKings, so 25 fantasy points would be a little bit over 5 times value. I think he makes a nice value play on DraftKings, and he scored 33 and 21 fantasy points in his last 2 games versus the Philadelphia 76ers. And in his last 4 games, he scored 24, 26, 28, and 27. So consistently right around or over that 25 fantasy point projection. So I like Brandon Clark here versus the Philadelphia 76ers. Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all of our DFS tools for all sports. You can try the Position Optimizer, where you can see the top players ranked for each position. And we added a new Player Trends tool, where you can see the top salary differences between FanDuel and DraftKings. It's a really good tool to help you pick out value for the site that you're playing on. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups. Okay, moving on to the center position. Okay, I'm going to give you the obvious stud pick here, but I like Nikola Jokic from the Denver Nuggets playing the Orlando Magic, who have the 6th worst defense overall, and they have been pretty good defending opposing centers, but Nikola Jokic has averaged 55.8 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 36 minutes per game with a 29% usage rate. He scored 32, 35, and 49 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 35, 34, and 28 minutes. He's projected at 54.5 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5 times value. He's 10,800 FanDuel salary and 100 less on DraftKings. Now I like this pick because he scored 67 and 49 fantasy points in his last 2 games versus the Magic. He's been underperforming his season average the past 2 games. That normally doesn't last long with Nikola Jokic. So I like Nikola Jokic here versus the Orlando Magic. Okay, now I'm going to give you a mid-range play. This is a risky play, but if you do want to try to save salary at the center position, I like Kelly Olynyk from the Houston Rockets playing the New Orleans Pelicans, who have the 8th worst defense overall. And although they've been pretty good defending opposing centers, Kelly Olynyk has averaged 24.5 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 27 minutes per game with a 17% usage rate. He scored 19, 28, and 47 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 21, 24, and 33 minutes. So the minutes being reduced in the last couple of games, you see, have hurt his fantasy production. He's projected at 24.2 fantasy points here tonight. That's only 4.3 times value. So he's going to need about 28 to 30 fantasy points to get you 5 times value or more. I think he can get that done, but this is a risky play here. A tournament play only if you want to save some salary at the center position and play a center that does have 40 plus fantasy point upside and I even think he can get you there in 25 minutes. So I like Kelly Olynyk as a high-risk, high-reward tournament play here versus the New Orleans Pelicans. Okay, now if you're looking for another risky tournament play here at the center position, high risk, high reward, but the salary's low enough here where I think this might be a little bit less risk than Kelly Olynyk, much less top upside, but chances are he's going to hit value here. I like Willy Hernangomez from the New Orleans Pelicans playing the Houston Rockets, who have the 4th worst defense overall, and they give up the 6th most fantasy points to opposing centers. Willy Hernangomez has averaged 17.4 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 16 minutes per game with a 17% usage rate. He scored 22 fantasy points in 21 minutes last game. He's projected at 19.3 fantasy points here tonight. Now on FanDuel, that's only 4.6 times value because he's $4,200 FanDuel salary, but he's $400 less on DraftKings. So I love that DraftKings price. I think he makes a pretty nice value play on DraftKings. He's priced right. He scored 38, 17, 20, and 19 fantasy points in his last 4 games versus the Houston Rockets. So I like Willy Hernangomez as a high-risk, high-reward tournament play, especially on DraftKings here versus the Houston Rockets. If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smiggity smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NBA slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.